Income inequality has made the incomes and quality of life of poor and middle-class Americans go down while the richest Americans have amassed an enormous amount of wealth in the past few decades. Inequality has always existed and will always continue to exist. People today are becoming aware of the real-life effects of an unfair society. Income inequality. What is it? Income inequality describes the distribution of wealth, particularly in an unfair way among a number of different groups of people. So, income inequality is not a new concept. Most historians will agree that unequal distribution of wealth was one of the key causes of the Great Depression in the 1920s. There's an abundance of data out there to support the idea of income inequality as a real thing and as having negative effects. First, let's look at a basic display of how wealth in America is distributed between the major economic classes. Hopefully that can clear some things up for you. But in all seriousness, let's look at some recent data. So from this chart here, you can see that in 2010, of all the income gains amassed as a country, 37% went to the top 0.01% of Americans, with the average gain being $4.2 million. And if you look to the right of the chart, you can see that the 99% of Americans gained only a measly $80 on average. Does that seem fair to you? Income inequality is not just an American thing, but we certainly do it well. This is a world map of economic inequality worldwide using the Gini coefficient, which is an algorithm used to measure economic inequality globally. The United States is in purple and the countries with greater inequality are in red, while the more economically equal countries are colored blue. So what this map tells us is that we are more equal than some parts of Africa and South America, but less equal than most of Europe, Canada, Australia, and so on. The reason this is a problem is because economically unfair societies tend to have correlations with negative social and health issues. For example, we see here in this unfortunate graph that by and large more equal first world nations almost always have higher educational scores. You can spot the United States all the way to the right and landing about in the middle for test scores. Also important is to look at Finland, which boasts the highest educational marks while having the second lowest income inequality for this set of countries. These types of correlations are not isolated. Here we see a similar graph, but this one is measuring child well-being among first world nations and comparing that with their respective rank of income inequality. We can see that the Scandinavian countries rank high here, whereas the United States ranks among the bottom for this set of data. Wait, you might say. I thought capitalism is great for everyone.
Well, why should there be any question about it? Hasn't it given us the highest standard of living in the world?
Income inequality is not only measured on a country-by-country basis, but also can be measured using the Gini coefficient for a state-by-state rank. Looking at this graphic, we can observe that income inequality appears to be high in New York and Massachusetts, as well as a few southern states, and lower in the Midwest. So we have a similar type of graph as before, but now ranking states in the US by measuring health and social problems overall. And like the other graphs, we can look at them and realize that by and large, the more unequal states have a higher rate of health and social problems. You might now be wondering who is to blame for all this disorder. Could it be the politicians?
Are there no fair questions about the distribution of wealth without it being seen as envy, though?
I think it's fine to talk about those things in quiet rooms and discussions about tax policy and the like. But the president has made this part of his campaign rally. Everywhere we go, or he goes, we hear him talking about millionaires and billionaires and executives and Wall Street. And it's a very envy-oriented, attack-oriented approach, and I think it'll fail.
Are wealthy people the culprits?
I think he's lying. Is that a gram? New card. What do you think?
Woohoo. Very nice.
Could it be Wall Street? At the end of the day, however, we can't just focus on who is to blame. We have to ask not only when did this happen, but how did it happen? Over time, data has been recorded that might indicate that tax policy and presidential reigns have had at least some part in causing this level of income inequality. Graph after graph shows that for at least 30 years, the income gains have disproportionately gone to the already wealthiest Americans. The fact is, the median income of the average American household has not seen the gains it should have. What's particularly interesting about this graph is that no matter how rich or poor you are, it shows that you are going to be financially better off under a Democratic president. If you're asking yourself still, what's the point? I think it all comes down to quality of life. What kind of country do you want to live in? Life will always be at least a little unfair, but do you want to live in a country where profit is put before people? Are you okay with accepting an income that won't rise with inflation? Are you okay with policy decisions in the hands of the super rich? Supreme Court Justice Louis Brandeis once said, "We can either have democracy in this country, or we can have great wealth concentrated in the hands of a few, but we can't have both."
Inequality doesn't just affect the people at the bottom, doesn't just affect the poorest. These differences are so large because the vast majority of us do less well in a more unequal society.